All right. Hey there, I'm Chris Funk, and this is Nathaniel Rateliff at the Newport Folk Festival. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I want to say congratulations on a great show last night.
Thank you.
Epic show, and it's Sunday morning here. Just, you're not supposed to talk about time, but it is Sunday morning, so thanks for waking up and making this happen.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I wanted to talk a little bit about record labels. For those, I think when you're a young artist, you want to get a label, you want to go on the road without going into your full band origin story and whatnot. But what was your first entry into a label, and what did that look like for you?
Early on, Joseph and I, Pope, who still plays in the Night Sweats, we played together for years. We had a band called Born in the Flood, and there was a small label in Denver that helped us put out a couple of records, or a record for that band, and that was kind of a smaller, a really small label, and so I didn't really have too much experience with the labels until I signed with Rounder Records.
Right.
And I was put out one record on Rounder, and then they got bought by Concord Records, and then I got dropped. And then my manager, Chris Titzelli, started a small label to help me put out my second solo record. And then that kind of went through 30 Tigers so we could use their distribution.
Right.
And, because that's kind of the main thing. It's not necessarily always about record advances or tour support. Unfortunately, that's like the painful process of being a touring musician is you don't always have gas or hotel money to make it to the next gig.
Promote the record ostensibly.
Or much less promote the record. So yeah, we did the one on my own, and then Concord approached me right as the Night Sweats were starting, but the Night Sweats was just like a project I had started in my attic that I was recording in GarageBand with one microphone, and I had sent some of those recordings to Richard Swift, who was a friend of many friends, and then Richard just called me one night and was like, I really like these songs, bro. He's like, what's your process? I was like, I have one mic, I move it around the room, I have like a one little interface. He's like, that's basically what I do.
I was going to say, I've been to Richard's studio.
Like, yeah.
Richard has one Coles.
One Coles, and we made that first record. I went out there with, and the funny thing is that my A&R guy who had signed, once I got signed to Concord, which kind of came back, and I was a little reluctant to sign to Concord since I had gotten dropped by Rounder because of Concord. They're going to love this. And so Matt Marshall, who signed me, my A&R guy, who's a really good friend now, who Swift also liked. After Richard and I had been talking, Matt was like, what do you think about working with Richard Swift as a producer on this record? And I was like, already talking to him.
Right.
And so we had decided to make the record, and Richard really wasn't about, he wasn't too concerned about like what he was going to make. He was really into just the music, and we became more than best friends. It was like Richard's as a person was like the light in the room. He
100%.
was very magnetic. But we had a lot of similarities. Some of them were not great, and so it's taken me a long time to like kind of change the way I do certain things to take care of myself and what my health is like. But Richard and I, we became fast friends, and he would always like, it's like you're my twin, and so, we went out there, and I started, since I had been doing most of the recordings myself, and the band wasn't really quite a band, and the solo project I'd done for years, that lineup was kind of changing with the exception of Joseph, and so I was honestly kind of about to quit playing music and maybe continue just to be a full-time gardener, which is something I loved, and brought me a lot of joy. And I was like, well, if I can't play music professionally, I could do this and be happy.
Right.
But I went out to work with Richard, and we started the record, and Matt Marshall, my A&R guy, was calling, and he was like, how's it going? I was like, great, doing a song today. He's like, you mean like nuts to butts? I was like, yep, whole thing. Just basically mixed by the next day. And then Richard would continue to tweak stuff, and he's great. He was great at that. He was great at that. Like the 4 records Damien Gerardo and him did together, that's a lot of Swift magic.
It's amazing.
You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
absolutely.
And so we were just kind of doing that, and Patrick Meese, my drummer, and I had a really good relationship, and he's also can play most of the instruments in the studio with the exception of horns, and he's a great engineer. And his ears are just, they hear different things that I do, and so the plan was I go out and work with Richard, and then Pat came out to meet us.
Right.
And yeah, and then we just hit it off, and we were having such a good time that the first night that Pat was there, I carried him home, threw him on the couch because we were staying in this basically like a tough shed type thing.
It's a cob cottage.
Yeah, that you
Yeah,
go
been
up
there.
into,
Yeah.
you know, and there was like, there was a sink and a shower and a bathroom, and that was kind of in like a mini fridge. And so the next day, Pat was like, oh man, you know, pretty hungover, and he was like, what did we do last night? I was like, you played drums on 5 songs that I already played drums on. And he had, you know, so I played drums, and it was my first instrument. So the first record has a lot of double drums on it.
Cool.
But so has all the records since, you know,
Right.
end up playing drums on.
So it's fair to say that going to Cottage Grove, Oregon with Richard Swift, making a record there was low expectation from Concord at this point.
Yeah,
And yourself,
and
you're like,
myself.
let's make
and,
cool
you know,
art.
I like it, and also though it was kind of a last ditch effort. I was
Right.
like, I had a feeling, you know, I was like, this could be, you know, this could be something. But I feel like as an artist, you feel that way about everything you're doing, you know, and you pour yourself into it in a way that you're like, oh, this is going to be a big deal. And then it's like, you know, not a big deal most of the time.
Right.
You know, pretty
Yeah.
quiet audience. But,
Yeah.
you know, we got really lucky, and, you know, even, you know, that record ended up going gold. And, you know, we had a, you know, the song S.O.B. did really well, which we did the last day of recording. I didn't want to record it. I didn't like the song. And Richard was like, so, this song. Because I had some songs like, you know, songs off that first record, like How to Make Friends.
Right.
Which nobody knows, but it's like one of my favorites. It's like a B-side somewhere. You know, those are the things that I was interested in, that I wanted to put out into the world. But Richard was like, and Patrick were just like, convinced me. They're like, so Matt Marshall, you're our guy. He loves this song.
Yeah.
It's like, uh-huh. He's like, Chris, your manager, he loves it. I was like, uh-huh. It's like, when you played it live for people, what do? I was like, they freak out. He's like, uh-huh. So we should probably do this song. I was like, I guess so. And he's like, we're just going to try to make it cooler than it is.
Yeah.
And we succeeded, and, you know, that song went on to do really well.
Yeah. So that.
But, you know, you also, you know, I think the advice to, you know, that I've heard from other musicians, even Jerry Douglas was telling me yesterday, he's like, you know, when I produce people's records, I'd be like, don't put a song on here that you're not prepared to sing every night
Right.
for the rest of your career.
Right.
Well, that's kind of the case, but, you know, I've grown to love what that song has become, and, you know, it's something that, you know, I'm kind of making light of a situation that happened to me, and talking about struggling with addiction, and a situation where I actually was having delirium tremors from, you know, drinking excessively for a very long period of time. You know, and even though it makes light of that situation, people have come up to me, you know, and be like, you know, my dad or my husband or my brother, you know, like struggled with alcoholism, and this created an opportunity for us to have a conversation as a family, or, you know, as a couple or as partners, and
Right.
you know, and so I think that's the other lesson there too, is that, like, regardless of how I felt about the song, it had reach far beyond anything that I could perceive, and ends up being a blessing to people.
Sure.
And that's why we create things, is to try to give people an opportunity to experience things, and to allow themselves to be vulnerable in ways that they're not usually capable of.
Yeah.
You know?
And a song that you were uncertain about suddenly becomes everybody's song. So
Yeah.
you proudly sing it then, right?
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing. Once you put it out into the world, you're relinquishing your ownership of that.
Right.
And so that takes some of the responsibility off of me of whether I like it or I don't like it.
Right.
And now it's become a thing where I get to be a character when I perform that, and I just think about, you know, people's response and, like, what that means to people out there, you know. And
Yeah.
You know, and there's shows where sometimes I'm sitting there making a set list with my keyboard player Mark or Patrick and my tour manager Will. And, you know, someone would be like, no S.O.B tonight? And Will or TM will be like, yeah, you can not play that, but not everybody has a song that 25,000 people would stand up for.
Right, sure.
So are you going to play that one or just keep everybody in their seats?
Right.
And so, it's, you know, we always make the decision to play
Right.
it.
So when you have a song that's successful like that, and a little bit back to labels, I don't know what label you're on now.
I'm still in Concord.
Still in Concord.
You know, interesting enough, like some of the people I work with Rounder were still in our camp. And I was lucky enough to have Chris Staselli, and he helped build a fantastic team around me. And we, you know, it's really a family. And Concord has been so supportive.
Yeah.
I never get asked what I'm going to do.
I was going to ask you that. You
Yeah,
had
you know,
success. Like, what's the next singles?
Yeah, no, there isn't. It's never a question of, you know, well, this doesn't sound like it's going to do well on radio. I think, you know, we kind of, you know, there's not a formula for that, but I feel like, you know, we try to write songs that are exciting to us, and luckily we have a team of, you know, people at the label who are excited to support us and put that stuff out there and take a chance on, you know, even songs like Face Down the Moment that on the new record where I was unsure of where that should live, but, you know, we play that live now and it's really powerful to people in the audience, and I can see it happening.
Yeah.
You know, and it may not sell the same kind of copies that S.O.B does or get that kind of response, but emotionally it does, if not more so. And, you know, and so I feel like I'm winning,
right?
Even if it's not going, the record's not going gold or single's not going platinum, you know.
So you had this like really, you know, circular Rounder to Concord, who bought Rounder, dropped to you. You were like, I don't even know if I want to do music. You made, you know, an album in Cottage Grove with Richard, one microphone. Had a great time. And there's a lot of people that want to get signed to a label because they understand that's the stepping stone to it. So you're kind of blessed in that way, where you're like, this could happen or not, you know. And I think like for people that want to get signed to a label, like, do you have any advice there? Is it necessary to do that? Is it something that's like, what's the plus and the minus of a record contract?
I mean, the minus is you could get lost in the mix. You know, and that, you know, it can be multiple things, like who is the person who's going to radio?
Right.
You know, is it AAA radio? Is it, you know, like, and all of that is based on building relationships. Even now for us, you know, like, we have good relationships with those people, with non-commercial radio, and, you know, and
You have like fans, at DJs at the station.
yeah, and I mean, some of
Yeah.
those people have been with me since the Rounder days. You know, and I had a great radio guy then too. It was just a hard record to get off the ground.
Yeah.
Memory of Loss. So
Yeah.
it was a pretty tough title, and
Yeah.
the subject matter is not very but I'm still proud of that record. You know, I look back and think I would have done it differently.
Yeah.
But you know, I was pretty green, and it takes a long time to figure this stuff out. And I guess that's the only downfall is, like I said, you get lost in the mix. Depending on
Lost
who your
in the mix,
team is.
meaning like other artists that are bigger
Yeah,
than
you could have a similar sounding band,
Right.
Or another group or artist that does something similar to you that just happens to do so much better. You know, and I thought at the time when we put out that record and the team, we kind of had, there was a lot of variables. Like I got signed, I had a publishing deal. Dave Ayers signed me, and Dave Godowski. Those are the first two guys. Dave signed me to Rounder. Dave Ayers signed me to Chrysalis. Well, then Concord absorbed Rounder, and then Chrysalis got absorbed by BMG. And so now I'm on a roster with all these different artists, and that's how you get lost in the mix.
Right.
And that's a perfect example. And also at the time I put out that record, you know, we're touring with the Low Anthem, we're doing dates with Bon Iver, we're doing stuff with Tallest Man on Earth. And, you know, the stuff we're doing at the merch booth, we couldn't keep records, you know?
Yeah.
But that's not translating into
Sound scans.
sound scans, or, I mean, even, you know, you report that stuff. That's what you did back in the day. It was like, we sold how many CDs, that counts for how many sound. You know, like, you're trying to, like, I was like, I don't know, I got drunk, and who counts in and out? You know, we didn't have a tour manager, we were driving ourselves, you know? And so, you know, like we were touring with all those people that were having great careers, but we just kind of were getting, you know, kind of mixed into that, and there wasn't things like streaming platforms where your song comes up on a playlist, or, you know, that just didn't exist then. So you needed like a physical copy of something to get into somebody's hands, and I think that stuff's changed now. And so having this conversation is interesting because part of me doesn't even know, you know, exactly the way it works nowadays. And I feel like younger people are finding ways to get their music heard and seen, and working around labels. You know, like a good example, my friend Gregory Alan Isikoff, you know, he toured in a pickup truck for years.
Yeah.
And, you know, he still, you know, for the most part, owns most of his publishing.
It's amazing.
He was putting out his own records, but it was, you know, grassroots. Like, he was going everywhere and sleeping in his car.
Get in the truck.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
I still think that's a really profound message, and my band did the same thing. We hit the road, you know, we made it happen, and now, you know, I interviewed Claro yesterday, who had a song called Flaming Hot Cheetos. It was a YouTube sensation. All of a sudden, her first tour is opening for Dua Lipa. You know, we talked a lot about that. It's like, there's two ways to do it, and there's a lot of avenues, and they're both still work, though. I still believe in hitting the road. And
and I mean, that, you know, when I was getting started, that was, like, the YouTube thing wasn't a possibility.
Yeah.
And I was never good at putting myself out there like that. I've always been better at, like, I suck at social media now.
Yeah.
I prefer to not be on there.
Right.
I don't want to look at my phone.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's impersonal to me.
Right.
Versus like getting in front of people and performing. You know, because you
the
feel like you
songs.
can. It's like you're not physically touching people, but you feel that way. You know.
Right.
You're sharing a space and you're sharing energy together, and I feel like I've had better luck being emotive that way.
Yeah.
Than trying to like do a glam shot of myself for Instagram.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't.
It shifts so
I'm
quickly.
not a glamorous guy.
You're looking pretty good today.
Oh, thanks. Perfect jacket for the weather.
Yeah. I mean, it all changes so quickly too. I mean, I pay attention a little bit to how we're receiving music, you know, in the public, and everybody was saying playlists, like you're saying, but now my understanding is no, it's not YouTube anymore. Now it's TikTok. Everything's TikTok.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't
But
particularly
then
care.
some TikTok's holding some artists prisoner, you know.
Correct.
You know, like.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, well, why are the artists being influenced by the influencer?
Right.
The artist should be the person that has sway over what they're doing, and not have the industry pushing them around. You know, I feel
And that's exactly what Claire said yesterday too. Was like, once I realized, like, wait a minute, I'm the artist. I don't need this MD to tell me what my stage show should be.
No.
You know? It should always be artist led.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stumbling blocks out there in the industry. There's difficult language with record contracts, and it's like, you know, we need people to help us interpret these things. But I often ask myself, why? Because you're the driving force of this, right?
Well, and even now, you know, I catch myself, I'm like, you know, you're in the middle of a tour, you're like, why is this happening like this? I was like, well, because I wasn't involved enough. I wasn't making the decisions that I need to make sure that I'm comfortable. I'm not communicating what it is that I need that's going to make me feel successful in a way that works for me.
Right.
You know, because it can be perceived by everyone else a certain way. Like, well, you should be really happy. And I was like, I'm miserable.
Yeah.
Because of all these, you know, because of logistics.
Right.
You know, and you know, being on the road is not easy.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you try to stay? I know your manager. You've got a great manager, a great person, great visionary in the industry. But do you feel like, do you have a lot of meetings with him around album releases and with the label? And
I mean, we're very close. So we talk a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I try to come up with ideas, and then he tries to figure out how to make them work. And then, you know, even like this weekend, we wanted to be a part of Newport this year, but we played last year, both projects, the solo project and the Night Sweats. And so I was like, well, we can't do either one of those, so what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And then we ended up doing a tribute to Paul, and then Chris managed to get Paul here.
That was amazing.
You know, like,
Yeah, right.
I don't have those strings to pull, and I don't, you know, I can't call Paul's manager. Chris can.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sitting down with us.
Absolutely.
That's been Nathaniel. I'm Chris. Thank you so much. Thanks, dude. That's
Absolutely.
great.
Thank you, bud. I've been having Paul Simon lyrics in my head for years now.
You sounded great.
Bone digger, bone digger.
It was really great.